Let's begin this video by opening the DevTools inside the Chrome browser, and we'll do that by pressing the F12 key. So once the console is open, I'm going to go to Sources, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see the code a little bit better. To begin understanding how to work with JavaScript, I'm using this feature of the browser called snippets, where we can simply add a new snippet by clicking the plus sign here with a text that says new snippet. And then I can just type the name of my snippet, type the code that I want, and click Ctrl S to save it. I can also right click right here and just simply click remove to remove the snippet from the console, from the DevTools. So let's begin understanding JavaScript. The first exercise that we're going to do is open JavaScript console and run some comments. To toggle on off the browser developer tools, we can press the F12 key on the keyboard, just like we did at the beginning of this video. So I simply press the F12 key to turn on and off the DevTools. Next, to have the console appear right here or disappear, I can simply press the escape key. So whichever tab I'm on, if I just press the escape key, that will quickly pop up the console on that current tab. Alright, so let's begin by understanding what comments are in JavaScript. A comment is simply some text that JavaScript ignores. So whatever I type here, JavaScript will not even look at it. I can also write single line comments like this, or I can write multi-line comments like this. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward and easy. So with that being said, we can already move to the second example. And the second example has to do with naming variables. Variables are labels for pieces of memory. They are kind of like labels on jars. So inside a jar you have some value, and the jar has a label, and that label is the name of that variable that holds the value inside of it. So to name a variable, we can use the JavaScript keyword var like this. Var whatever. Var something else. Var. So it can be any random set of characters. Of course, there are still some rules, and the rules basically say that we can begin our variables either with a letter, so any letter A to Z, big or small, or we can begin with an underscore. We can even keep it as one character only. So an underscore, a character, or a $sign. Any valid variable name can also contain a number, but the number is not allowed to be the first character in variable name. So if you look at all of these are all valid variable names in JavaScript. So if you want, you can also run your snippets by simply pressing Ctrl Enter right here. So if I do that, I'm going to get the console to do some work that happened right here. Right now we're just declaring variables, so there's nothing really substantial to see here, but it's a good thing to know how you can run your code snippets. Alright, so now we have a question. When I declare a variable, why does the console return undefined? So for example, if I type variable, some variable, I get back undefined. Now, why is that? And this is a very interesting concept to understand. When you declare a variable, you get undefined. And the answer to why that happens is because it is a statement. Because all the code in JavaScript is basically either a statement or an expression. And statements always return undefined. So I think that's enough for this snippet, and we can move on to the next one. In this snippet, we will discuss the assignment operator, and the assignment operator is basically a direct order. There are no ifs, there are no maybes. You are ordering the computer to do something, and it must oblige. So when I say var a equals 10, I'm ordering the computer to create a new variable, call it a, and assign the value of 10 to that variable. I can easily update variables as well. I simply type the variable name and I give it a new value. So, for example, I have a equals 8, a equals 5, a equals 3, whatever I want. And if I want to check the value of the variable, the current value, I can simply type a, or the variable name, and I will get back the actual number. So now we have this exercise. For each line below, we need to decide whether it is an expression or a statement. So for var x, I'll get back undefined. For y equals 5, I'll get back 5. And for x equals 7, I'll get back 7. Now, there are a couple of important concepts to understand here. And the first one is, because every piece of code is either an expression or a statement, each of these lines are, of course, either expressions or statements. So, as we said in the previous snippet, statements always return undefined, and expressions always return a value. However, we need to know several things. Since undefined is a value itself, basically what this means is that statements indeed can return undefined, but an expression can also sometimes return undefined. So we might say that statements always return undefined and expressions always return a value, keeping in mind that that value can still be undefined, the value of undefined. A second thing that is really important to understand at this point is that you can declare a variable without the var keyword. So I can simply say var something, but I can also say something else. Of course, if I declare a variable without the var keyword, I also need to assign it a value immediately. So I'll say something else equals a number. So what is the difference between these two? The first difference is that declaring a new variable using the var keyword is always a statement, and declaring a new variable without the var keyword is always an expression. Besides that, there is this neat little trick that we can look at. For example, let's first clear the console here, so we have more space to understand the example. And now I'll type, for example, no var used equals 1. So I have a new variable, and I haven't used the var keyword to make it. And because I haven't, I can just type delete no var used, and I'll get back true. So now when I type no var used, I'll get an error because no var used is not defined anywhere. However, I cannot do the same thing with variables that were declared using the var keyword. For example, I can type var, and I'll just some var name, and I'll give it the value of 123. And now when I type some var name, I can indeed see the value being stored in that variable. So now when I type delete some var name, I get back false. And when I type some var name again, I get back the value. So JavaScript is full of quirks like this, and it's sometimes helpful to both know they exist and how to avoid issues that might arise from just the way that the language behaves. So, for example, there is this one thing called the strict mode, and if we use the strict mode in JS, we can basically avoid the problem of variables declared without the var keyword. So, let's see how that works. If I type ASDF equals 1, I indeed make a new variable. However, if I type strict mode, or use strict to be precise, and then I type ASDF equals 1, I'll get back ASFD is not defined. And it's not defined because the strict mode prevents us from creating a variable without the var keyword. Alright, so let's move to the next major topic, and that's checking for equality. You need to ask your computer these three questions. Is 1 equal to 1? And is 1 equal to 2? To have the computer answer if two things are the same, we can ask it like this. 1 double equals 1. And we'll get back true. If we say 1 double equals 2, we get back false. So a way to think about this is if you have 1 equals sign, that's an assignment operator, which means that we are giving our computer a direct command, an instruction that it must obey. Whereas using double equals is a question. We are asking the computer if something is true. We are not ordering it to do something, we are just asking it if something is correct. We can also use 3 equal signs. 1 triple equals 1, 1 triple equals 2, and there are some subtle differences between using double equals and triple equals, but we'll leave that for another video. Alright, so that's all that there is to discuss regarding checking for equality at this stage. So next, we're going to discuss checking for equality with the help of the assignment operator. So let's look at this exercise right here. We have var a equals 10. So let's say var a equals 11, just for sake of exercise. And now we are going to ask our computer, hey computer, is var a equal to 5? And the computer is going to say false, it's not. So we can say again, hey computer, is var a equals to 11? And the computer will say, yes, it is, that's true. Alright, so basically, when we combine the assignment operator with the equality operator, we can get some interesting results, and we are starting to see some logic and the way that we can introduce it to our programs. The next topic is console.log and clear. You've probably already seen me do the clear in this video. You must have seen it. I've done it a couple of times. So if I type clear and I open and close round brackets and press the enter key, that will clear the console. And this is really handy because sometimes I can have a whole bunch of stuff here. Let's make a huge comment here. And if you're wondering how I'm skipping to the next line, I'm simply pressing the shift key and then pressing the enter key while still holding the shift key. You see, I've just missed it right here, and that's why I got basically the code to execute, and I got the uncaught syntax error because I haven't actually closed my comment. So let's clear out the console again, and let's type the same thing, shift enter a couple of times, and that's how you write multi-line code inside your JavaScript console inside the Chrome browser. So now we can close the comment and we get back undefined, which means this is also a statement. Alright, so let's clear the console again. Let's make it a little bit lower so we see our example here. And let's say how we can view the current value of a variable with console.log. So let's say variable a equals 1. And then let's say a is set to a plus 1 plus 15 plus 12. Now, before we continue with this example, there's this very important thing you need to really completely understand before you can move on. And that is that the assignment operator right here is not the equals operator. The equals operator in JavaScript is a double equals sign or a triple equals sign. So if you see this, it's not mathematics. It's not like you have it in math. Something is equal to something else. If you want to check for equality, you use double equals. If you are using a single equal sign, you're actually commanding your computer to do something. And here we are basically doing this. We are saying, hey computer, I want you to take the current value of a, add to it all these numbers, and then all of this together, whatever sum you get, put all of that inside the a variable as the new value. So now we had the value of 1, which we can replace right here. This a letter can be replaced with the value of 1. So the new value of a is going to be 1 plus 15 plus 12. And when we press enter, we'll get 29. So now if we check for the value of a, it's no longer 1, it's 29. And we can also log it to the console by saying console.log a, and we get back the value of a. There are also some other ways you can use the console. For example, console.info a, and we get this again. To see all the options that we have available for us, we can simply type console dot and then, for example, use the error here, console.error a, and it'll just show it in a different way. It will display it differently. Alright, so let's clear this and we move on with our snippets. So the next snippet that we are going to use in this video, and if you're wondering, there's altogether 11 snippets for this video, we are going to increment variables in JavaScript. What that basically means is to add certain value to variables and increase the value of variables. So if we have a variable a and we give it a value of 1, when we want to increment it, we are basically saying a equals a plus 1, which is now 2. And we can also console log a, which is 2. We can also use console.warn, for example, a, and we get just displayed a little bit differently. Alright, so now we know that our a is at value of 2. So the first way to increase the value of a variable is say a equals a plus 1. So let's say we have a b variable and we set it to value of 10, and now we can say b plus equals 1. This is basically shorthand for b equals b plus 1. And the result is exactly the same. If we write b equals b plus 1 or b plus equals 1, we get the same result. And since this is such a common operation in coding in JavaScript, we also have even shorter way of incrementing the value of a variable by 1. And that third way is, let's say, var c equals 1. C++ is basically the shortest way to say c equals c plus 1. And this will still return 2. So now we know 3 different ways of incrementing variables in JavaScript. In the next snippet, the modulus operator, we will discuss this very interesting operator that can help us do lots of things in JavaScript. And to write an operator, the modulus operator is basically to do it like this. Of course, we'll write it in the form of a comment, so we actually don't run anything. But basically, we are saying a modulus of b, or x modulus of y. And what that means is, if we say, for example, 10 modulus of 5, we get back 0. And that means that when we say 10 divided by 5, we'll get back an exact round number. We'll get back 2. And it means that there is 0 remainder left. So 10 modulus of 5 equals 0 is basically the same as writing 2 times 5 plus 0 is equal to 10. The returned value is 0 because the remainder is 0. There's no remainder. However, if we say 11 modulus of 5, we get the returned value of this operation is 1, and the computer returned 1 because basically what we're doing is we are dividing 10 divided by 5, which is basically 2 times 5, like here. 2 times 5 plus 1 is equal 11. So the remainder of the division is 1. We can also do 2 modulus of 5, and in that case we get back 2 because 0 times 5 of course is 0 plus 2 is 2. So when we say 2 modulus of 5, we get back 2. However, if we say 2 modulus of 6, we also get back 2. And if we keep on going, we'll always get 2, because if the first number is lower than the second number, the result of that modulus operation is simply going to be the first number returned. If the numbers are the same, 2 modulus of 2, we'll always get a 0 back, and if the number is greater, what gets returned just depends on whether it is fully divisible with the number that we're dividing with, or if we are going to get some kind of a remainder. Okay, so now let's go a little bit more advanced, and let's put this modulus operation inside a function definition. So here we've got the function definition that says get modulus xy, and then log out the operation. And this is our function's definition. And if you're interested in how function definitions work and how functions work in JavaScript in general, we've got the bit.ly, or actually the correct link is bit.ly.com js-function-anatomy. And if we open that website, we're going to see the actual article. I published this article a few days back on Medium, so this is the anatomy of a JavaScript function. And this gives quite a few explanations about how functions work in JavaScript, and I think it will be quite useful for you. Alright, so back to our code. We've got the function defined, so we're going to press run snippet, and now basically what we've done is we've loaded this function into our memory here, and now when I type get modulus 10, 5, we get 0 because 10 modulus of 5 is 0. And this is an easy way for us to play around with the modulus operator. Alright, so that's basically it for the modulus at this point, and the next snippet that we are going to discuss is for loops. What is a for loop? For loop is a piece of code that checks if a certain value is within a range. And if that value indeed is within a range, then the for loop gets run repeatedly. And whenever it repeats the code inside of itself, it will check if the condition still holds. Once the condition for the for loop to run is no longer true, the for loop terminates. And this is the structure of for loop. Basically, the for loop has three values: the start value, the end value, and the how to update value. And it's very helpful to think of the for loop as some kind of a counter, which basically is set to count whether a value of variable is within a certain range, and if it is, it will run the code inside of it and update the value that keeps track of the condition to run the code. So let's run a simple for loop and see how it works. And here we can simply type for var I equals 0, I is less than 10, I equals I plus 2. We are incrementing our variable by 2 on each loop. And here we'll simply console.log the value of I. And think about it before we actually run this code. Think about what you might expect as a result of running this for loop. There's actually two questions. How many times will the for loop run? And what values will show up in the console? What values will be logged to the console once we run the for loop? Alright, so let's do it. And of course, we get the beginning value of 0, and then on each iteration, the loop increases by 2. So altogether we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values printed to the screen. And as soon as the value of y got increased to 10 or more, we jumped out of the loop, which basically means that the code finished executing. Alright, so next let's kick this up a notch and let's actually put this for loop inside a function. So we'll say function incrementor, an interesting name. We're passing it a number n, and what we're doing is we have a for loop and we're saying var I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus equals n, and here we are logging out the value of I. And this time what will happen, since this is a function definition, we'll just save it in memory, and now when we actually run it, incrementor 10, can you guess what will happen? The thing that will happen is that the for loop will begin by setting the value of I to 0. It will log out the value of I, and on the next run it will update the value of I to 10, and since that's the value that is greater than the end condition for a loop to run, the loop will only run once. It will not run more than once. And to make sure that this is exactly what happens, let's press the enter key and see that in action. Alright, so if we say incrementor 9, we'll get it printed twice, so we can keep on. And actually, to repeat the last command faster, we can press the up arrow key, and I'll just change the value of the key inside, of the number inside the function, the number that I pass it. So once we got down to 4, we were able to run the loop 3 times, and of course, the lower the value, the more times it will run. Alright, so that's it for the for loop. And next, we can look at using the prompt. So the prompt tells us to put some value into the prompt dialog. For example, if I type this to the console, I'll get a question of how are you? And I type, let's say, I'm fine. How do you get back this value? It's somewhere in memory, but we actually can't get it back. I can't type something to the console and let it type out whatever I type, let it console out whatever I typed inside the prompt window. And the reason is simple. We haven't put it in a variable. So let's store the result of the user typing into a prompt, and let's store that result into a variable. So if we say var a equals do you like TV, and I type I do, now when I type a to see the contents of the variable, I'll get back whatever is inside. Of course, we can print out the value stored in the variable as explained in snippet 005. So I can simply type console.log 5, and that's the result that I get. Okay, so that's using the prompt. In the next snippet, we will discuss if conditions. If conditions basically allow us to control the flow of our programs. And if you want to control the execution of your code, you can set up different conditions. And if a condition is true, the code will run. Otherwise, it will be skipped. So here we have a little program that basically first asks the user to answer the question if they like TV. That's the code from the previous exercise. And if the user says yes, then we're going to log this out to the console. If the user replies no, then we'll log this value out to the console. If the user replies with a maybe, then we'll give back the user some other response. And finally, with this last else, this will cover all the other answers. So if the user doesn't reply with either a yes or a no or a maybe, then this time we'll respond with this sentence. Alright, so it's time to run our snippet. And if I type yes and press enter, I get back there is an excellent program on the TV right now. If I run it again and type no, maybe I should read a book. If I type a maybe, it'll say I'm indecisive on that matter myself. And finally, if I type something that makes no sense whatsoever, I'll get back I don't understand foreign languages. So that's if conditions for you. And next, we are finally ready to run the Fizz Buzz Exercise. And the Fizz Buzz Exercise is a very simple exercise in coding that allows us to see if a person can code at all. And the beauty of a Fizz Buzz Exercise is that A, it's very simple, and B, it basically combines all of the things that we discussed in these first 11 snippets that we've seen right here. So the way that it works is like this. It's an old children's game, I think, where basically you need to shout out either fizz or buzz or fizz buzz, depending on whether the number that you are calling out is divisible by 3 or by 5 or by both 3 and 5. So if you have 3 players counting numbers going in circles, they would start off with 1, 2, fizz, 4, 5, 4, buzz, 6 is actually fizz. So you see, I'm already losing it, but that's why we have computers. So let's first run the Fizz Buzz exercise and see what happens. When I press Control Enter, I basically get the result of running Fizzbuzz from 1 to 100. And now it's easy. 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz, etc., etc. And when both numbers are divisible by both, when the number is divisible by both 3 and 5, we get a Fizzbuzz printed to the screen. So now let's look in more detail into how that code is run. And let me first clear the console. And let's also, actually, we can see the program running step by step by adding this simple line of code right here. And that's the debugger. So if I type debugger, semicolon, and go back here, and now when I press Control Enter, it says debugger paused right here. And now I can control the flow of execution of my program. Or actually, I can basically step over each function call. So an interesting thing when the debugger is on, if you hover over a variable, it will give you the current value. So we can see that the for loop started with var I equals 1, and we see the value of var I in this little pop-up badge that says 1. So let's step over the next function call with a click here or an F10. Press to the F10 key. So if I click here, I can see that the program is skipping, and then it reaches console.log. What will be printed to the console? Let's see. The program printed 1. It's increasing the value of I. Right now it's still 1. But after this plus is executed, because I didn't tell you this, but this section right here is basically a function. So when I step over this function call, now I is going to be 2. And now it's checking if I is less than 101. And if that's the case, it will run the loop again. So we're stepping over, the debugger is on, it's checking if 2 modulus of 15 is 0, and we know it's not, it's actually 2, so it's going to skip that one. It's going to check if 2 modulus of 5 is 0, and of course it's not, so it's going to skip to the next one. Now it's checking if 2 modulus of 3 is 0, and it's not again, so it's going to skip to the next one. And finally, it's going to console.log 2. So let's see that happening. And we get that right here. All right, so let's keep moving. And now the value of y is still 2, but soon it's going to be 3. All right, so now the value of y is 3. It's checking if I is less than 101. It is. So it's gone inside the for loop. Now it's checking if 3 modulus of 15 is 0, and it's not, so it's going to skip. 3 modulus of 5 is also not 0, so it's going to skip that. And now, since 3 modulus of 3 is indeed 0, let's see what happens. It goes inside of this part of our code, so that's the control flow of our program. And it's logging out to the console the word fizz and going back to the beginning of the loop. And again, I is 3, I is less than 101, and by the way, now I is 4 because we just incremented it with a plus operator. So now we're going back inside the for loop and printing out 4. On the next turn, it's going to print out 5, and it's going to just keep on running the debugger. So in this introductory video, we've learned a whole lot of stuff about JavaScript. We've discussed many of the common concepts, and in the next few days, I'm going to actually post another Medium post, which will include all the code from these snippets so you can practice yourself.